Welcome into Beyond Sunday. And I'm here joined by our Student Ministries Pastor, Ryan Parquette. Ryan, how are you?
I'm great. This is awesome, man.
And I'm y'all's host, Luke. First, before we get into this episode with Ryan, I do want to say as always, we'll have our 5-day devotional and small group questions in the link of this episode. And it's all to do with the message that we heard from Ryan on Sunday. So I'm excited for you guys to see that and to go through that with your small group, your spouse, whatever that looks like, as well as that 5-day devotional. There's a lot of great stuff in there. And now, Ryan, I just want to kind of get into your time at the Springs and some other things as well from this. But let's start there. Your time at the Springs. How long has it been now?
5 years.
5 years. And can you kind of just go through what were you, because you didn't start as a student ministries pastor. What was your first role at the Springs?
Yeah. So, man, it was like 5 years ago. My brother-in-law, Joseph, who's been on staff multiple times, still technically hides out and works here.
We love Joseph.
We do love Joseph. He was just telling me about this church, and he's one of those guys that's just going to hype up like anything that he's involved
Everything's
in.
the greatest.
Yeah, it is. He's just like, this is an amazing place.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you want to be on staff here? And so... and honestly, I'm more of a pessimist. So I was like, I don't know, Joseph. And then I applied for a Southwest Campus director. And we came out here and we had our interview on our way to Disney, actually.
As most do.
Yeah, and it was awesome. We interviewed, loved everybody we met, and we took the job. And I'll never forget going to Ron's office. He's like, "What are you gonna do next?" I'm like, "We're going to Disney." And so we took the job and we ended up coming down summer 2019.
Okay.
And yeah, so we were at Southwest Campus for a solid 2 years. And then through transitions during COVID and things like that, obviously it was a really hard time.
Right.
We came over to help start middle school ministry here at Ocala. And that was crazy to see the explosive growth in that. And to be a part of that. And the funny thing is, I never actually thought that I would do like student ministry. I was always involved in it, weirdly enough, a God thing, serving and things like that. Even when I was at Southwest Campus, I served in student ministry on the side because I loved seeing that connection, next generation in the church. And what I learned in my time in middle school is, like God was refining me in how I taught. And I treated every Sunday as if it was like the most important day, because it is. And whether there were 5 kids, and that's how it started, or there were 20 kids, and it grew and grew. But we just always treated it as like, this is the most important moment. And learning how to teach to a middle schooler, if you can do that, man, you can do anything.
That is something that is not talked about enough.
Yeah.
Middle school, even high school to an extent, but middle school, absolutely. Because if you're up there, there's just like jokes, like your humor's not the same as a middle schooler. In some ways, our humor stays the same.
Yeah.
But in the ways that you communicate from the stage, you'll say something that would land in a group of adults, in a group of high schoolers. With middle schoolers, they just stare at you.
No, I mean, not only that, they like, if you lose them, they're gone.
They're gone.
They're like looking around. And there was one kid, he was like afraid to go to the bathroom, and I'm teaching, and he crawls out of the line, and then I just see him skeeter like crawling. And like, how do you deal with that? You're like, preaching the gospel, and there's like this kid skeetering in the background.
Hey, son, you're free to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, hey, bud. Like, it's okay. You can go.
You absolutely could do that.
Yeah.
Ryan, take me back to, because you went to, where did you go to college?
I went to Ozark Christian College.
Okay. So let's go back there real quick. When you were at Ozark, what was you obviously being there at a Christian college, you were pretty set on ministry and what, let's say in college, everyone's got like a 5-10 year plan or idea in mind.
Yeah.
For you, it wasn't student ministry. Yeah. Was it that one day I want to be a lead pastor at a church, start a church? Like, what are the goals of someone that are at a Christian college, and for you specifically?
Yeah. So originally, I had gone out to do worship music or
Okay.
to worship ministry. I was a musician like my whole life, and we're talking about passion. That was what I was passionate about. To the expense of everything else, I was not passionate about schooling, and so I went to school there, and that was really when I started to encounter really just deep theology and scripture on a different level, and I just jumped in. I wanted as much as I possibly could get. And my trajectory at school was I did things opposite. So there were harder classes. Like they would tell you like these classes are later and when you've had established some things, and I just took them. So like my senior year, I was taking, you're supposed to take your prerequisites.
Right.
I'm in an English class with freshmen, and I've been writing like 20-page papers on Revelation, and so. But that was always my thing. I saw it, I wanted in, and so my trajectory at Ozark originally, I was I started to change when I realized like I really think I should start teaching. I just had that drive, but I never saw myself as like a lead. That's not what drove me. There was the passion for teaching. So it actually, the first time I had really kind of gotten into that was a 5th and 6th grade class on Sunday mornings.
Wow,
which is crazy.
Out where Ozark was.
Yeah, there was a large church there that I'd call it my home church. Right. But yeah, I was heavily involved there throughout my time in ministry and in that area. So I was doing that, but one of the things that I ended up just getting drawn into was church planting. Because truthfully, one of the classes you would go to New York, and I just wanted to go to New York. So I was like, sign me up. And I fell in love with it. And what I realized,
New York or
church planting.
Okay, all right,
yeah, and a little bit New York.
In New York.
I mean, I had the best Italian I've ever had.
New York has a lot of that.
Yeah, like this. We went to this deli, and I was like, it can't be that good. It was.
Was it just like a sandwich deli?
Yeah.
Okay.
But they were like, and part of the class was learning culture, and so these church planter guys like, yeah, just you need to go.
You guys are really passionate about Italian.
Yeah, and I became passionate about it, dude. To this day, I think about that sandwich, but so, it's a problem.
Yeah, right.
But so I went there, and the whole thing was how to understand and digest the city. Like, it was based out of Acts 17, where Paul he goes to Athens and he looks at all their idols and their art and then he goes and preaches to the highest philosophers and religious leaders in that city, quoting their philosophers. And so the idea is this like cultural agility. And what I found in that is my background, not growing up necessarily in a Christ-following home. Like my mom had religious elements. We would get drugged to church, but that wasn't really the core of us. And in my experience in an outside Christian environment, some of the experiences I had coming into the church I thought were weird, and then I found out that's like the majority of people now. And so it just unlocked this part of me where the church made sense, and I just had this desire to just run into the areas that needed the church the most. And so I after that I was in. Yeah. I wanted the church planting experience, and so that's actually what I ended up graduating with. Yeah. So I think I did all my prerequisite or all of the core required things that final year of my education. Right. I was like, all right, church planting major, and I just took them all. So I went to it was awesome.
That's awesome.
Great. Yeah.
And I wanted to also talk about your time on staff at the Springs. To date, what would you say is your favorite moment on staff?
Moment? Oh, man. It's like we went on a trip. At first I wasn't like, I didn't know because we use something here. It's like a church OS is what we kind of call it. But Ron coaches in it, and we use a lot of that language. And so it was a couple years ago. Ron was like, "You need to go learn this." So he sent me out to Las Vegas, and it sounds more fun because we literally were, in Las Vegas, but we were learning church operating system the whole time. Funny. By the way, that's like 8 to 6. And so
by the time you get done with that,
I'm cooked.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're relatively introverted too.
Yeah.
So I would say, obviously, by that 6 p.m. mark, you've been talking all day with people or absorbing. And it's like, man, I need a good dinner and I need to go to sleep.
And that is literally what I did. Like at the time, Ted Lasso was a big thing, so I would just crawl into my bed and just watch Ted Lasso. But,
That's so funny.
But I loved it because it was such a great experience, and really just being able to understand what our church does and is involved in, and just strategically thinking. That was one of my favorite moments. Like there's been so many moments here that have been just awesome, but just that level of being poured into was just a great time.
Yeah. I mean, I've been on staff now for I don't know, 5 months, 4 months, 5 months. But in one of my first weeks, we went to Drive.
Yeah, that was awesome too, man.
And which is Andy Stanley's North Point Church. And you talk about like being poured into and all that stuff. Like that, I relate to what you're talking about, just like that level of value of, you know, one of the first things one of the first breakout sessions I was a part of was just simply marketing to the skeptic.
Yeah.
And I think like with church, yes, we are the church and we are trying to reach lost people, but that strategy is always developing. How do we get ourselves in front of these people, and then how do we not blow it?
Yeah.
How do we show value of what Jesus can do in their lives?
Yeah.
To people who just sit in the service because they were brought by, you know, their girlfriend or their boyfriend, and they're skeptical about this whole thing, and they sit arms folded. So like that was just one of the breakout sessions, but that time was awesome to me. And it's like we as a staff are try to do one staff thing, like a conference annually.
Yeah.
And so if that's the one we go to every year, that'd be great.
Dude, it was so fun.
It was great. It was a good time, and it was team building as well.
Right.
And everyone's trading notes.
Yeah.
And that was probably my favorite time of that trip was the end. We had a meeting in the lobby of the hotel. And my dad was just like, all right, what was your favorite moment?
Right.
And then people just started sharing takeaways.
Right. And what was cool about that to me as well was I mean, you see the passion that each people have that aren't necessarily for you, like your passions, but you see that come out in the various breakouts that they took, right? And so someone would say something, and you're like, "That is an amazing idea." And it was such a fun thing, and I forgot about that. That's one of my favorite moments as well.
And you talk about passion, right? And that's something you taught on Sunday, where you talked about passion ignites potential, in others, and that's what that moment was for me as well, of just like seeing how fired up everybody was about their respective thing, based on their breakout sessions. And it was like, man, this fires me up to want to be the best that I can be,
right,
and bring out my passion of whatever that looks like. And for me too, like passion wise, I came from a podcast hobby background, right?
Yeah.
Recording twice a week about the Orlando Magic. And like, I did that for 4 years. I have a definite passion for it. And I think that there's a lot of value in things like podcasts.
Yeah.
And you talk about even in the message, like we have the you're it method.
Yeah.
Right. If you're passionate about something, you're it. I'm well aware of that method. I grew up here.
Yeah.
I know. I've heard my dad talk about it. People come up to him about, I have this idea for this ministry and we should do it. My dad was like, that sounds awesome. You're doing it.
Did that translate to home, by the way? Dad, I don't have any clean clothes. You're it.
Yeah. Oh, you seem really fired up about this. That's you're it. But that's what, in hearing the message, I was like, I knew that was a thing that we had on staff here.
Yeah.
And so when Nick started talking about like, I got everything back from the church podcast account. If we want to do something, we can. And it was kind of like, how do we make this not just to where it's our message from Sunday, but more than that?
Yeah.
Which hence beyond Sunday. So real creative there.
Selfless plug.
But the passion for it is there for me.
Yeah.
That I didn't know that I had until
That's
I
so
tapped
cool.
into it. And then 4 years of repetition.
Right.
And then jumping into this, but I was it, right? Like, okay, you've done it,
right?
Go do it. And what does it look like? And so dreaming that up and the potential of that and just the passion that I have for it is definitely there. But that's one of like you just going back to the Drive conference, like how much everyone's sharing their passion,
right?
Like you can get fired up thinking about your passion while someone talks about theirs too,
right?
So that's awesome. Now, kind of rounding out this segment of your time at the Springs, favorite moment on staff, but ultimately, what is your why? Like, why do you get up every day and feel motivated to come to work here at the Springs?
Yeah. Honestly, when I think about just what drives me, we actually, the worship night, we played a song, King of Kings. And I love that song. And the reason I do is there's a part of that song where it talks about, it literally says, like, and the Church of Christ was born. And man, when that line comes through, it's just like, that just stirs something in my soul. Like, I love the church. Like, the whole church, since its conception, like since it began, like, I love the church. And so what drives me is to see the church be the church, and to be what Christ has envisioned, and to be faithful to him, and to see the power and potential of that in our world. Because I truly believe that the gospel is the good news for the world, and the church is the hope, and it carries that.
Yeah.
And so that's what drives me.
Yeah.
And that's what drives me in any ministry, in any capacity. It's just like, we sometimes, like, we detach certain elements of serving, and we think that's like lowly, but it's like every core element. This is the gospel. Like, this is the hope of the world. And God is honored in all of that.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's what drives me, is to see the church be the church.
Yeah. And whether that is serving others, like we had the food drive that we did, that's the church being the church, right?
Right.
Or you hear this all the time, like, the church isn't the building, it's the people.
Yeah.
Or it is the church being the church in the simplest way possible, which is simply inviting someone who doesn't believe, or does believe but doesn't have a church home where they haven't connected yet, inviting them. Like, that is the church being the church. So I love that. I want to get into kind of just the brief overview of the message.
Yeah.
But first, one of my favorite parts from the message. It was a great message, by the way.
Thanks.
However, my favorite part was you getting to talk Denver Broncos football. You were talking about passions, and essentially you said, like, I'm passionate about football.
Yeah.
But more than that, like, I'm passionate about the Denver Broncos. And then can you just walk me through that story, your interaction with someone that was listening to the message?
Yeah. And I just, to emphasize my passion, like, there were times in my life where I literally I was helping someone, like, publish a book, and so I was helping him edit, and it was the most tedious, annoying thing, but the Broncos game was on, so I was literally running between my office and back, just so I didn't miss,
of course,
a single moment. And we lost, but
and you remember that you lost.
Oh yeah, and I thought to myself, was this worth it? And then, the next day I'm like, all right, I'm ready to be hurt again.
Yeah, exactly.
But so obviously I love them. I loved them I grew up with John Elway, and, like, he was a local legend. Like, it was in Colorado, so you'd run into him. Like, oh man, I got football signed by John Elway.
Yeah, here's just John Travolta, which is awesome. He's great, but
different John
Elway.
Different genre. But yes, so it's like local legend, and so I'm passionate about it. And yeah, obviously on Sunday they were playing the Bucks, and I just made a casual joke, like, we're cooked, we're gonna lose. You guys are, I mean, they look great. The Bucks look awesome, and this person yelled, "Have some faith." And I think I actually responded, "Nah."
Yeah,
like,
no, I don't think so.
Like, I have faith, but not in this moment. And she turned out to be prophetic because we won.
You won. And it was soundly.
Soundly, yes. And I was stunned, absolutely stunned. So anytime I preach now, I will say that Denver will lose, because that has to be the secret sauce.
Yeah, exactly. Although that was a great moment, it wasn't my favorite moment of you on stage. My favorite moment of you on stage was when a wasp made an appearance a few months back, and you had to navigate preaching and also the wasp. They don't teach you that.
No, but see, that's where the middle school comes back, because you never know when something's going to come flying. And so you're ready.
It was a wasp.
Head on a swivel.
Incredible. Now, can you just tell us, what was Sunday's message about for someone who may be listening or watching this that didn't get a chance to watch or listen to that yet?
Yeah. Essentially, it came down to our passions is what drives us to our purpose. And in life, if we're living life and our passions are misaligned or our passions are kind of skewed, it's a dangerous place to be. And so how do we understand our passions? How do we unlock our passions? We believe that's in the context of the church, that God has put something inside of us. He's given us gifts and spiritual abilities to use in the church to help grow the kingdom. And so we just reflect on a moment in Scripture where there was a misalignment happening and passions coming up, and how the church addresses that and then continues to grow.
And this whole series, at least these first few weeks, are all about spiritual gifts, and that's the basis of it. I asked my dad last week on the episode, but I want to ask you your spiritual gift.
Yeah.
What is your spiritual gift?
So I think my top two were teaching and discernment, which is like, all right, yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
It wasn't surprising. We all actually at Southwest Campus, when we were watching and we saw that like the link was up, we all ran and took the test, and everyone was like, oh yeah, okay, yeah.
Was this something, spiritual gifts, and talked about this last week as well, but spiritual gifts are biblical, but yet I feel like a lot of Christians put their personality and all that stuff into like the Enneagram. And there's not so much like, what's your spiritual gift? Like that hasn't been a conversation I have heard in a long time.
Yeah.
Was that something for you, like when we started doing this series, were you like, did you resonate with the fact that this is it feels like it's been put on the back burner in Christian culture, or was it even something for you? Because for me, I went and I took the test.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I don't know. I can probably take a guess at what it is, but I have no idea. I've never taken a test to find out. Was a test, was that kind of foreign to you to take that to find out, like not officially, but to give you a better idea of your spiritual gifts?
Yeah, because in my undergrad and even in grad school, we take something called spiritual formation, and part of that is assessing your gifting and how to best basically like nourish and feed your soul. Like how does God wire you to do his things? And so that was I don't think I've actually taken a test for spiritual gifts. It was more of like, I think it's these. I know I've seen this kind of affirmed by other people. We did take other personality tests. Like I knew my Myers-Briggs and all that, but spiritual gifting was more, it felt more of like like, so it was good.
Also, I think it is important for us as church staff to know our spiritual gifts.
Yeah.
But it's also super important for people who aren't on staff.
Yeah.
And I would maybe say more important because like you said, you've been on church staff. If you look at the list, you're like working on staff and helping people and accomplishing this goal of people becoming Christ followers. I have a general idea of what this is. And I'm already serving in the church. Like I'm doing this. But for people who haven't stepped into serving, this is pivotal.
Yeah.
To know, okay, maybe based on this, I can kind of plug myself in this ministry, whatever it is. It's super useful.
Yeah. And not only that, it helps us create a framework for why we are the way we are. Like there's just certain things that I think that, like even in worship styles, sometimes you can come to a church and be like, I don't know if I'm feeling this. And that may not be the way you connect to God because that's just not your natural, wiring and gifting.
Right.
And so, but that's permission, right? It's like a freedom, be like, oh, there's not something wrong with me. That's just not how I'm wired.
Right.
And so it's a great thing to understand at any level.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the stories that you talked about in your message was basically the gist of it is you wanted to start a student ministry thinking there's a great way to get people that are lost and their families through the doors. And the pushback you received was essentially, we're good where we're at. Like we're all right here. And I think that that really ties into why the question that the conversation I want to have is like, why is it easy for us to become complacent as people that go to church and people on staff to rarely invite people to church with us?
Yeah.
What do you think that stems from, in your opinion, and then we can have that conversation?
Yeah, and that whole story kind of comes out of I love that church. I'll always love that church. They'll always have a special place in my heart. I was a 22-year-old preaching. So they've heard some things, and so for them to take a chance, it was just awesome. And I think, it's easy for us to become complacent. When I think about that, I think about this philosopher. I know, pretentious, but his name is Søren Kierkegaard, and he had this frustration because the church bells would ring and everybody would go to the church. They would hear the sermon, they would hear whatever the worship was, and then they would leave and nothing would change. And so there's this complacency and a frustration that grew. And he's kind of the one that coined the leap of faith, understanding like faith beyond reason, like it just jump. But one of the things that I think we'll naturally drift towards in complacency is when we kind of put Christ in a box, when we put our faith in a box, when it becomes a service for us, right? So we can go and we can check the box. I kind of alluded to it being similar to, McDonald's. Like we go expecting something. I want a burger, so I got it and I leave and I'm good, right? So we want to feel like we're religiously righteous, like we've checked our God box, but we don't want any of the actual ownership. We don't want God to change our lives because we kind of like what we have. We don't want to trust God with the hardest parts, from money to anything, really, like anything that we hold on to. We don't want to trust, and so complacency grows when we just use it as a service for us. Yeah. Instead of going to the feet of Jesus and saying, no, wherever you tell me, whatever you need from me, I trust you with it all. And so, we'll always wrestle with that because there's always going to be a part of us that just holds on and we don't want to trust because can we trust him? Yeah. And God has always been worthy of that trust.
And for me, what I think of as far as like the complacency aspect. Yeah. I like to get to the root of it, right? And the complacency in our faith, but also the complacency of just like, this is my lane. Yeah. I'm saved. And what you're communicating to people when you're not inviting people to church is, I don't really care about the other people that, due to our beliefs, we believe that they will go to hell if they are not told. Right. And we can lose the urgency. And I often think it's because we are complacent in our faith. Yeah. And really what that means is that, like you said, you check the box. You come to church, and then you go home and you go to work, and that's it. Yep. But if we really are chasing after Jesus, we're going to have those encounters with him that are like, this was mind-blowing. This was truly a miracle that Jesus did for me or my family or my loved ones, or my friends, whatever. Yeah. And I need more people to be able to experience this. Yeah. And I think that we just have gotten away from, a lot of Christians are able to, it's really easy to drift. Yeah. And you don't drift to the right direction. You always drift away, right? And so that's, for me, we just don't have, a lot of times that we just so often lose sight of what Jesus has done. Right. Whether that's a result of lack of intentionality to have a relationship with him, or we just don't really seem to care about other people that aren't Christians. Right.
Yeah. And honestly, my understanding of church history, it's kind of funny because that's always been an issue. Like, is the church for us or is it for outsiders? And they've always wrestled with it. I'm not even kidding. It's like, since it's like, whenever there was persecution happening and the church was like first started, when it stopped, they were like, how is it are we still holy? Like, everybody around us is kind of okay with this now. And so who's really the insider? And so it's always been this struggle of, what is the church for? Is it for sinners or is it for people who follow God? And so I think, naturally we will continue to have those conversations. But I think it's kind of a two-way street. Like, I think that people want to grow deeper. And so you will naturally have community with other Christ followers who are, at your level. And that's a good thing. We want that. We want, like we say here, we want our circles in student ministry, for example. We say we want them, their church friends, to be their best friends, right? And so when that happens, it does lead to exclusion. And so we have to go against that drift. But at the same time, we do also need to recognize that a core part of following Jesus means welcoming outsiders. Like hospitality is an expectation that people will always be welcome, and that the gospel is moving forward, and it is for all. And in that message, there's a moment where they're really messing with the consequences, struggling with the consequences of that, because it leads to outsiders out of their social circles being excluded. And the church, it's an amazing moment, because what the solution ends up being, they not only hear them out, but then they elevate them so that they're in a position of authority.
Right.
So it's not just they're excluded, they're part of the conversation now.
Right.
And it's awesome.
Yeah. And I think people often, and this is this idea of inviting people to church is probably a whole series in itself.
Yeah.
How do you have these conversations with people? And coming from a non-church working background, over the years, I've worked at a few different places.
Yeah.
And what I will say for people who are listening to this that are thinking it is so intimidating to invite someone to church with me, start with the big holidays, right? Or start with the big holidays, or start with someone who comes to you and they confide in you about something that they're struggling with.
Yeah.
If you work somewhere, a lot of times the people that you at least work with in your department, or the closest 3 to 4 staff that you work with, they become friends. Whether they are friends that are just friends at work, or that you hang out with them socially,
right?
You are going to have these conversations, or the opportunities will present themselves. It's up to you to have the conversations. And that's something that I really didn't start taking super seriously until we moved back here to Florida from being in Nebraska and working in insurance, and just my staff there. Our staff there was super close. Yeah. And there was a lot of people that, we would just talk, have honest conversations. Yeah. Hey, I'm struggling with this. I don't know what to do about this. Or a holiday, Easter services, Christmas services. Those are good places to start the holiday invites, but they're not always the most effective. Yeah. The ones that are super effective are the people that are going through stuff. Yeah.
And when I think about that, it's kind of practicing presence, where we should just engage everything as if we are representing Jesus, right? And so in college and out of college, I worked in restaurant, and restaurant workers are they've seen
a different breed.
Yes, because you see all of humanity at their worst when they're hungry, right? And so you see the worst and best in people, and it wears on you. But the conversations, being a Christ follower in that place with other staff members, always came up out of shared relationship and presence. So in the message this past week, I quoted where it says, do everything heartily, do it to the glory of God. And truly, there is something to just doing your job to the glory of God. If people can see you working well, treating people well, and that you're trustworthy, when things go awry, then those conversations happen. And so for me, it led to conversations like, there's this guy, I love him to death, and he introduced me to CrossFit. So I joined that cult for a little bit. So he was a great dude, and lived a crazy lifestyle. And we would have conversations, and he'd be like, he was younger than me, but he'd just be like, Ryan, messed up. And we would talk about it, and real life wisdom was there. But that was just one of many stories, and people knew that I was serious about my faith, and they knew that I was not just practicing in theory, that I literally, I love Jesus, and I'm going to do everything I can to the best of my ability and just be a good person. And so when you live that way, when you live with integrity, your invite means more. You're not checking a box because you're like, I want to be a good Christ follower, so let's invite everybody I can. It's more so, I mean what I say, and people know that, and there's just something different because of the way that we pursue Jesus.
Yeah. And for me, you're looking at this from the lens of someone, let's say that you're listening to this and you go to the Springs. The Springs has gotten to where we are at because people invite people.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think it's super easy early on in the church, like when you hear about the Springs had 20-something people, the first service that they had, my parents didn't really know what they were doing at all, and they just were trusting God blindly, like just a leap of faith, right? And I'm assuming it was pretty contagious.
Yeah.
Back then, it's like, oh, we had 20-something people, and now here are a couple weeks later, we have 50 or we have 60, right?
Yeah.
To where this is all happening because people are inviting people.
Yeah.
And that's contagious. Talking about passion,
Yeah.
igniting and showing the potential in others. There are certain things within our faith that are contagious.
Yeah.
Your passion, and that all ties into your passion for people.
Yeah.
Inviting people. And I just so often wish that at the Springs, we do a great job, and we have obviously a great group of people here.
Yeah.
But there are people, and I'm saying this as someone who wasn't always inviting people, right? There's this sense of like, they're good. The church is good.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, if we are doing and accomplishing the goal that we are set out to do, which is just to tell people about Christ and let Jesus do the rest, and we are going to be, believing that he's going to make that happen.
Yeah.
We just have got to continue inviting people, because that is at the heart of it. That's what we're called to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, thinking about that and the dynamics and shift as a church gets established, obviously, because again, church planting background, I helped plant a church in Colorado. And when you're in that phase, it's all ownership, right? Everybody is needed. Like when you're doing church, like Middleton knows this right now, right? Like when you're doing church out of the box, you need every hand, because it is a crazy experience. There's nothing quite like waking up at 6 a.m. to drag a bunch of equipment out of a truck, especially when I did it in Colorado. It was like snowing, and it's like, you've got to be bought in because you are in it together. But every single person is needed. And when you get to a higher scale like this, where there are volunteer teams and things like that, there's this sense that you might feel like you're not needed. And when you feel that way, not only is there less buy-in to the church, because again, you start operating it as if it's something to serve you. It's not a place you can go and give yourself away. And so when you get into that mindset, I do think that invite also becomes that way, because it's less about like, look what we're doing, and it's more like, they're good.
Yeah.
Do I really want to have an awkward conversation?
Right.
And it's like, if you're serving and you have this level of ownership, it's like, come look what God is doing. I'm giving myself to this. It's such it's something that, again, we have to wrestle with that drift of it being less about for me and being more about where I can go and give and receive.
100%. And what I want to tie that together with, talking about inviting people, the best scenario, like I said, is when someone comes to you with, I'm struggling with this, or I did this thing wrong, and I don't know, I just need to tell somebody.
Yeah.
We have the answer to the healing, right?
Right.
And how crazy would it be if you had a medicine that could heal somebody, and you just held it when they were telling you, I'm struggling with this thing. And it's like, okay, I've got the answer, but I'm not going to say anything.
Because it could get awkward.
Right. It could get awkward. But it's like, move boldly in your faith and just tell them, like, you have the answer.
Yeah.
It's Jesus.
Yeah.
And the first step is to invite someone to church.
Right.
And come with me, sit with me, make it as comfortable as possible.
Yeah.
And I promise you, like, the only awkward part of those conversations is the initial question.
Right.
Where do you go to church? what kind of just like how they were raised or
Yeah.
whatever. Like if they talk about church when they were being raised, then like they obviously grew up in church.
Right.
But if they're talking about how they didn't, they don't ever mention church and whatever, there's a lot of windows of opportunity,
Right.
to mention Jesus and to mention, hey, just come sit with me.
Yeah.
It's as easy as that. If you can have these meaningful conversations with them. If it's easier for you, text them after. Hey, I was thinking about our conversation. I would love for you to come sit with me in church, right? Being on staff at a church, we have kind of the cheat code to inviting people.
Yeah.
Because inevitably, the question happens.
What do you do?
What do you do?
Immediately the tone shift, like
Right.
especially if they've been cursing.
Oh, 100%.
You're like, oh no,
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, like what do you?
I'm so sorry that I've been cursing. It's like, please, can we not do this?
Yeah.
But I will say, I was getting my hair cut recently.
Okay.
And we started talking about the lady that was cutting my hair. We started talking about church or what we do for work, not church, not yet. And so how long have you been cutting hair and blah blah blah, right? I like the boring icebreaker cut questions because then eventually they ask me what I do, and I get to tell them, oh, I'm on staff at the Springs, and then they'll go to one of two ways. Eventually, they'll drift back to that, like, what do you do? Or they just won't even.
So what else do you do?
Yeah. What do you do for fun?
Yeah.
But those conversations for us as staff are great.
Yeah.
And wanted to kind of just share this win so that it encourages people to just have a conversation about church in general with people that they're maybe afraid to, whatever. This was a complete stranger.
Right.
I didn't know this lady. She's never cut my hair before. And so I tell her I work at the Springs, and then I learn more about them. They moved here to Florida about a year ago. They live like 45 minutes away from Ocala, and she makes the drive a few days a week to cut hair. Well, in talking to that, later in this conversation, she goes, so what do you do at the Springs? And I tell her, digital media and all that stuff.
Podcasts.
And then podcasts. And so then I just tell her, I just ask her, like, where do you guys go to church in Williston? Because clearly she had some interest. And she said, well, we go somewhere, but I don't know. We haven't really gotten plugged in yet. We're looking for a bigger church, but we haven't been able to find it. And this goes to what I talked to Andrew Downey about a couple episodes ago of there is a church for everybody.
Yeah.
There is a church for everybody. The church that they go to now, it has people. People love that church, I'm sure, right?
Yeah.
That is their church.
Yeah.
But she said to me, we've been looking for a bigger church. We moved here a year ago, but we didn't really want to make a drive into Ocala to test something that we didn't really know anything about.
Yeah.
So I pull up our social media, another plug, at Church of the Springs.
Who's in charge of that?
I showed her a night of worship.
Yeah, you're like, look what I made.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, this is something that I worked on.
Yeah.
I'm super proud of it, but this was an awesome night.
Yeah.
And she was like, that's your church? She's like, that looks like a concert, but that's exactly what I want. And it's funny because you hear a lot of people say like music is too loud or it's too much like people outside of the church might say like it's too much like a concert. That's what this lady wants.
Yeah.
And so I said, hey, actually, are you on Facebook? And of course she is. And she was like, yeah. So I add her on Facebook. I say, I share our stuff all the time. You'll find our profile through there. And she was like, great, you're definitely going to be hearing from me. She's got 3 kids, like a 12-year-old, 10-year-old, and a 2-year-old, I think. But she was like, I just want something for my kids and for me and my husband. And so just a really cool encounter.
Yeah.
Nothing crazy about it. Super simple. And it all happened just because I told her what I do for work. Now, for people who don't do anything like in the church for work, you could still slide that into a conversation if you serve at the Springs, right?
Right.
Oh, I work here, and then I serve on the weekends at Church of the Springs.
Right.
Just sliding in those small, subtle things that lady circled back to me talking about working at the Springs, and it just super awesome. And I think that we all, including myself, need to just consistently do that because you do it once, you have a great conversation, and then you're ignited to continue to have those conversations.
Yeah, and I think about that, and there's a couple of things that just come to my mind. And the first is like in Scripture, there's this story, Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch. If you know the story, this eunuch is literally, he's reading Isaiah. And like you had talked about how certain, like they're just signs. Like you have the medicine, right, for the situation. Why would you hold back? And so this guy's literally, he's reading Isaiah, and Philip is like, hearing him in his chariot go by reading Isaiah. I don't know if he's reading out loud or what, but he literally runs up to him and is just like, do you know what this means? And the guy's like, no, tell me about it. And he tells him about Jesus, and he gets saved and baptized. And you think about the boldness of that, again, in a pain point of somebody who's really wrestling with something with life, because we all will and have. And you have the answer to that. And so it's like, run up, man, be bold. Go knock on their window at Publix. Don't do that. But but it's like literally that boldness of you have the answer. And then I think about what you're saying with this person. There's something that I picked up from somebody about evangelism, and it's like this Holy Spirit pulse check, right? You check your pulse, see if there's any signs of life. And so if somebody is completely off, there's no pulse. Don't push, because like spiritually speaking, like they're not looking. You can say something, but if there's a pulse there, and there's this feeling like, okay, God is doing something in their heart and in their life, like that's a moment. Again, be bold, just go for it. And like you had that conversation with that lady she's looking. She wants to be more connected. She's new to the area. That is a common story. And that's a Holy Spirit pulse check of like, all right, now like you should come. Like come. Yeah, and so it's such we just be bold, just go for it, you know?
Yeah.
So
and you might, a lot of the time it might mean that you're going to hear no.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, I'd say it's a no, or it's we can't make it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that can be discouraging. Right. But just think back to the conversation of like just how incredible it was that you got to share an invite, and also just talk about Jesus. There was a time, maybe like a month ago, on Wednesday nights, I serve in spring students.
Plug.
Yeah. And during you at the end, I believe it was at the end of the message, you kind of charged them with invite somebody.
Yeah.
And in small group, sitting with 11th and 12th grade boys, essentially what I said to them was invite someone, and everyone I was like, do you guys have someone in mind? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. We have this conversation, and some of them share, yes, I do, and all this. And then I said, great. Now think of just the most intimidating person that you know that you would never invite them to church. And I said, I want to challenge you guys to invite that person.
Yeah.
Whoever that is. I said, and guess what? You're probably going to hear no, but you have no idea what that will start the domino effect of in that person's life.
Right.
And God and Jesus, dude, the Bible talks about people react. There's a reaction that happens and takes place when you hear the name of Jesus. That absolutely will happen. That there will be something, that stone will start rolling downhill and it'll pick up speed, and then you have no idea. You kind of set it and forget it, right? And then you just continue to be the Christ follower that you are around them, and then maybe eventually they'll come and sit with you at church, or years later they'll confide in you because they thought that you were mature as a friend in high school or whatever.
Yeah.
And then also the next week, I think it was the next Wednesday, we had an incredible night at Spring Students, and it was like, these kids actually took the challenge of inviting our friends.
Yeah.
And just how incredible that is that we had that. And because of those invites and that practice they got inviting friends, they're going to be more well-equipped as adults to do that. And so just there's so much power in an invite. And and I just hope that we continue to live with that boldness, or start to.
And one of the things that you keep saying too, that is so important, man, is you keep saying, "Come sit with me."
Yeah.
That's like a personal thing, right? It's not like hey, come to my church. Hope to
Right.
see you there. Like,
Exactly.
I'm going to get my coffee, say, hey, you made it. You're here. Or, then
Right.
adios.
Yeah.
No, that's like, I'm going to walk with you. And so that's so much more personal.
Yeah.
And when we talk about igniting passions, nothing will ignite a passion in you like seeing God move in someone else's life.
100%.
And I think I see that with the students when their friends are showing up and they're like, they came and all of a sudden now they're bought in, and it's just a contagious thing.
Yeah.
But to walk with somebody is such a better invite than just this like, hey, just show up.
Right.
Like, no, I'll be with you, because going to a new environment by yourself is one of the hardest things to do in any context, and especially in a big one. Like if going to, let's say, we go to a football game, right?
Right.
That's not a place you go to get your best friends, but you
Right.
do go with your best friends.
Yeah.
Right. Like I'm not going to a game looking for deep community.
Right.
And I would really be terrified if you.
That's where you go.
Yeah. It's like, who are you trying to meet? But you do go with people. You go with people that you walk with. In the same context here, it's like people. We don't want to just drop them off. Like we want to walk with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Ryan, I've enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, man.
I think we have now set another record for the longest Beyond Sunday
Listen,
episode.
I can go over. We all know this.
But I appreciate you having a conversation with me.
Yeah, man.
I'm hoping that this is productive, useful, and insightful for people that are listening to this. Anything else to add before we get out of here?
No, man, this is a blast. Thank you for your passion for podcasts.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Igniting the potential.
Dude, I am passionate about this. This is awesome. So
That's awesome. Well, thank you guys for listening.
Yeah.
We'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya.